I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, I'm Tom Lochner, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We're excited to be a partner with Extension to bring you research-backed resources, tools, and tips to keep Wisconsin marshes productive and profitable.
So good afternoon and welcome to the first virtual brown bag for cranberry growers of 2023. As we tend to do in the non-growing season when the berries are under ice and maybe you're outstanding, we like to focus on things that are cranberry related without being as agronomic focused, taking advantage of the time we've got. So we are going to hear today from Jim Versweyveld, who's going to talk about keeping the right people, as well as our entire UW-Madison Division of Extension farm management team. A couple of housekeeping items. I have turned on captions. If you enjoy captions, you might need to click more and then display captions, but those are on for those who prefer it. We are going to have the chat running live the whole time. So if you have a question, feel free to type a question in the chat throughout. If you want to ask a question anonymously, you can use the little 2 drop down and choose that you want to ask Allison Jonjak, and I will ask it anonymously on your behalf. And I think the only other thing I had to add is that Tom Lochner of the Growers Association is out serving us at the CMC today and the latter half of this week. So on behalf of Tom, who's out there, welcome from the Growers Association. I'm going to hand things off to Steph Plaster right away, and she's going to introduce the farm management team.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. Hello, I am Steph Plaster. I'm a farm management outreach specialist. Our farm management program at Extension is led by Trisha Wagner, and we are newly expanded this year. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to introduce ourselves and our areas of focus. I myself have an area of focus in business development, which covers entrepreneurship, diversification, and strategic management or long-term planning. And I'm particularly interested in how we add value to the farm. I'm excited to be working on a project right now, exploring best tools and information needed for folks to make decisions relating to investing in technology, whether that be automation, monitoring systems, robotics, or any of those more complicated systems. I would love to hear from folks on your needs related to business management. Please feel free to reach out to me or drop me a line, even just to share an idea. You can find our contact information on our website at farms.extension.wisc.edu, or I'm sure if you reach out to Allison, she would just love to connect you with us. Another member of our team who could not be here today is Katie Wantock, and Katie works, she's another farm management outreach specialist who works in financial management, and she also addresses tax management and risk management, specifically as it relates to insurance and marketing. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Joy to let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Joy Kirkpatrick, and my title is Farm Succession Outreach Specialist. And I've been in that position since 2004. And previous to that, I was the dairy and livestock agent. We called them agents then, and started doing that in 1993. So this is actually my 30th year in extension, but a big a big portion of that has been succession planning. So that is been developing educational programs around succession planning, working some one-on-one with farmers on succession planning and doing research. Right now, the research that we're doing is we're doing some what we call interviews with ag service professionals who work around succession planning and asking them, like, basically, what's the best prepared farm, if you want, we're working with the best prepared farm ready to do the succession planning work. What would they have done ahead of time, and what sorts of documents would you like to have them bring to you? So we're working on those interviews and hoping to incorporate what we find out into our work. Right now we're doing a flipped virtual classroom, which means we're doing educational program or sending out materials, having people review those beforehand, and then we're meeting virtually to talk about succession planning. So that is a pilot that we're doing that Steph and others are helping me with. And I think unless anybody has questions, I don't know if we're taking questions, I'm going to turn it over to Jim so he has more time for his presentation.
Thank you, Joy. Appreciate that. My name is Jim Versweyveld. I'm going to share my screen now. My programming specialty is labor and safety. So I work with farms across the state on hopefully, improving their HR component of their business. I've been with Extension for 4 years, and previously to this farm management outreach specialist role, I was the ag educator for Walworth County. So assuming that everyone can hear me okay and that my screen is visible, I want to get started with keeping the right people. Keeping the right people is a component of a larger curriculum that we call Becoming the Employer of Choice. And specifically, this session today, so today's Brown Bag webinar, will focus on recognizing talent, career pathing, and upskilling as tools to retain the good employees that you have. Okay, so start off by setting the stage with no surprise to anyone who's on this webinar that there is a growing worker shortage in Wisconsin, and it is affecting our farm's ability to be productive and profitable. Wisconsin's workforce is approaching full employment, and full employment in this case is an unemployment rate of 3.2%. That is statistics from year-end 2022, so at the end of December. Basically, what that means to you is that when the unemployment rate hovers around 3%, the vast majority of workers that want to be working are working. So in other words, that means as we have vacancies and openings, we have to attract them from other positions that people are in. If we put a few numbers around it, if we kind of create the context around that, the Bureau of Labor Statistics provided this data at the end of 2022. And basically what it says is there are 99,000 unemployed workers in Wisconsin. Now that sounds like a big number, but compare it to the 261,000 job openings that exist in the state of Wisconsin. So you can see by doing the math that there's not a lot of extra workers available for positions as businesses try to staff up or grow their opportunity. The labor participation rate in the state of Wisconsin is 64.7%. And what the labor participation rate is it's a view of the population age 16 and older that is either working or actively seeking a job. So what that tells us is that 35.3% of Wisconsin's population is not interested in working, so that restricts our numbers even further. We know that potential workers can be attracted to alternate sectors, and that simply means that agriculture sometimes, for some workers, has an image problem. It may not be viewed by all workers as the desired place to start or continue their career. And part of that is what we kind of call the 3 Ds. The 3 Ds are something that has plagued agriculture for ever, really. And the 3 Ds stand for dull, dirty, and dangerous. And that's a perception that some workers have about working in agriculture. And when I refer to dull, specifically, it's monotony. It's doing the same task over and over again. Dirty, obviously, is working outdoors, getting your hands dirty, and that isn't something that everybody desires to do. And then the last one, dangerous. And we know that agriculture has been plagued with higher than average accident and injury rates. And so for some workers, it's maybe not their top choice of places where they want to go. The other trend that we see is less availability of migrant agriculture workers, and that's for a variety of reasons. COVID didn't help. Certainly as countries, the US included, went on various phases of lockdown, that certainly restricted international people from traveling to the US with the possibility of future employment. And then another thing that kind of plagues our industry is the H-2A work visa process is rather cumbersome and complex. It can be rather daunting for farm managers. Because of the complexity of that program, some farm managers are reluctant to tap into that migrant agriculture worker population that is available. And then lastly, we see that Wisconsin's rural workforce is decreasing due to an aging population. This isn't new. This is a trend that we've been seeing for decades. But the rural communities in our state are aging out, and the young people are leaving, usually for jobs and opportunities in larger towns or cities. So given all that situation, one of the worst scenarios that a farm manager can have is when their top employee, their top talent comes to them and says, I'm leaving to advance my career and take on new challenges. Not something that a farm manager wants to hear. But most employees are driven by fresh opportunities. We know that the chance to grow, the chance to learn, the chance to achieve more things is something that is on many employees' minds, particularly the highest achieving employees. Bigger paychecks may be part of that, but it's not always the primary driving reason. And that's the reason for this presentation, is to talk about ways that you can develop career paths within your farm to retain the talented employees that you have. So let's start off with a definition. So what is career pathing? Career pathing is the process. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you, Allison. I appreciate that. Yeah, Allison's going to launch a poll. Before we shift into career pathing, she's going to launch a poll that talks a little bit about labor shortages, specifically on your farm. So you should see the poll now. It says the labor shortage, and then there's multiple choices there. Hasn't affected our farm to a significant degree, has been somewhat challenging for our farm, is a significant concern for our farm business, or has been highly disruptive to our farm business. And then the last option is I'm not a grower, but still wanted to answer the poll.
It looks like about half of the attendees so far have voted, so give it another. All right. I'll go ahead and display our results here, but it looks like only one respondent says that they have not been affected really. Two have been, call it somewhat challenging, and three would say that it's a significant concern. So fairly, for the percent who are reporting on that topic, it's more likely to be more significant. I'll let you keep going then, Jim.
Great, thank you, Allison. So that is, I think, helpful context as to why this, is a valid topic for many farms in our state. So back to the definition of career pathing. Career pathing is the process of aligning opportunities for employee career growth with organizational talent priorities, so the needs of the business. This process may include mapping career direction based on vertical, lateral, or cross-functional roles. Vertical simply being promotions from an individual contributor to a team lead or to a supervisor. And then vertical and cross-functional are where employees are moving into similar level roles, but with different tasks and responsibilities within the farm. Career pathing is driven by the individual skills, interests, and career objectives. So if you are interested in creating career paths on your farm, there's a few things that you need to have in place in order for that to work. The first is building an organizational structure. So an organizational structure is basically the org chart of your farm. And if we use a corporate example, in a major corporation, you have a layer of individual contributors reporting to supervisors. Those supervisors report to managers. The managers report to directors, vice presidents, the CEO, and so on. On farms, the organizational structure is typically much flatter than that, typically with less layers of management, if you will, and the senior leader, the farm owner, having more direct reports than you might potentially see in a corporate setting. If you're interested in how to build an organizational structure, an org chart for your farm, there is a resource on our Farm Management Topic Hub that kind of walks you through that process and how you would lay that out. The next step is defining positions, skill sets. So basically job descriptions. Job descriptions on many farms are non-existent. And then on other farms, they might exist somewhere in a binder tucked away, collecting dust. And so I would encourage you to revisit those job descriptions and make sure that they're up to date and accurate and reflect the positions on your farm. If you don't have job descriptions, again, we have a tool on the Topic Hub that can walk you through how to do that. It's a step-by-step guide that actually helps you develop job descriptions for your farm. Next step is you identify a key employee or multiple employees that career pathing is for. You track a roadmap. So let's call this hypothetical employee Bob. You've identified where Bob is today. You want an end goal in mind for Bob, and you're tracking a roadmap of what Bob needs to do in order to get to that promotion or new position within your farm structure. Along with that, you're identifying training needs for Bob. Bob may not have the skill set needed for the new role that you have in mind, but there may be things that you can provide or outside training groups can provide to Bob in order to reach those. With that, you create a development plan for Bob. And a development plan takes that roadmap and puts dates and goals to it. So it gives more specificity around that roadmap as to we're going to accomplish this by June, we're going to accomplish this by October, and so on in Bob's development. And then lastly, and most important, is follow through. This is the type of thing that if you make a commitment to Bob to develop his career on your farm, and then you don't follow through, in some ways it's actually worse than not starting the conversation in the first place, because you've set that employee up with an expectation of future growth and future opportunities. And if it's a conversation that just disappears, that can be very discouraging and disheartening for the employee. Creating career paths on your farm needs to be tied to your business goals. So you need to differentiate how you need to identify how the goals on your farm, your overall strategic plan for your farm, aligns with specific employees' individual plans. There's some research that was done by World at Work, which is the American Compensation Association, and they have identified that even small investments in a person's growth and development can show marked improvements in loyalty and engagement for that particular employee. So it really is money well spent. You can differentiate yourself from other competitors in the labor market, and competitors in the labor market are other farms in your area or other employers outside of agriculture who employees, Bob in this case, might be attracted to. You can also retain key workers. So this is a situation where you've identified Bob as a key member of your team. You're wanting to build a development plan around him in order to keep him engaged and satisfied and excited about the work that you do on your farm. And then there's an interesting body of research around keeping younger workers. And this is something that this research actually shows that there's generational differences in how workers perceive opportunities presented to them. So the baby boomer generation, for example, which is now retiring at record paces and leaving the workforce, but the baby boomer generation was known collectively for loyalty. They tended to join an organization and they hung in there through the good days and the bad days. And what we're seeing in Gen X and Gen Y is less of a tendency to do that, less of a tendency to stay with one employer for long periods of time or through the bulk of their career. Gen X is employees that were born between 1965 and 1980. Gen Y are employees born between 1981 and 1996. And it's interesting that with Gen Y in particular, they are so motivated by new opportunities and learning new skills and developing new skill sets for themselves that they actually rank that higher than pay raises as far as ways to keep them excited and motivated in their jobs. So we talked about aligning goals, setting clear goals for the farm. Your goals for your farm obviously should be targeted. They should be strategic, built around a vision for the farm. We're not going to spend a lot of time today on goal setting, but my colleague Steph Plaster has done a lot of work around goal setting. So if you are interested in how to build strategic goals for your farm, Steph is a great contact for that. You also need to get buy-in from leadership. So before you roll this out to your employees, you may need to make sure that your leadership group, whatever that group looks like, could be family members, could be other employees that are in a leadership role on your farm, that they're on board before you roll this out to the employees. Because if they're not, it can actually backfire when employees start to hear inconsistent messages from various business leaders. Next step is to communicate your goals to employees. This is something that not every farm manager is comfortable with, and I totally understand why you might be reluctant to share very specific financial goals with your entire workforce. But high-level goals, strategy goals that are moving the farm in a particular direction without the dollar signs attached to them really should be shared with your team, because it gives a feeling of connectedness. It gives a feeling of belonging and a feeling of being part of the mission and the vision of the farm. And then the next step, which aligns with the career pathing, is helping employees achieve their individual goals, particularly when their individual goals align with the goals of the business. So let's make up a hypothetical example. So in order for Bob to advance his career on your farm, he needs a CDL. So maybe you invest in a training class for Bob, help him to actually get his CDL license, and that creates some stickiness around his desire to not only achieve that goal, but actually achieve that goal and then use it for your farm. Another example might be one of your key maintenance people on your farm wants to take a welding class. Pay for the welding class, and then you'll see that that employee is more likely to take those welding skills, apply them on your farm, versus taking those new skills to some other employer. So we've talked a little bit about training and developing employees, but why do we train employees? What are the reasons for training employees? Well, hopefully, first and foremost, it's to improve business performance. Hopefully, all the trainings that you're providing to your employees can somehow be tied back to moving the needle towards more productivity, more production on your farm. The training may be to address internal weaknesses. Something keeps breaking, employees keep breaking something, employees are not following a process the way you would like them to follow. That's an internal weakness that can be addressed through training. The next would be to meet or hopefully exceed industry standards. An example of that might be pesticide applicator training, which is a requirement. It's a required training, and it's very likely that on your farm that some or multiple employees need that training in order to do their job. Many farm trainings revolve around safety. Safety is a popular topic for training on the farm, and that's a great thing. Also, we hope that our trainings are increasing employee engagement, which then leads to better retention and growth. And then ultimately, hopefully, we're creating happier customers, because if we're building a better workforce on our farms, that should translate into the products that we produce and sell. But why do farm trainings miss the mark? All those things that farm trainings ought to be often aren't happening on our farms on a regular basis. And why is that? Well, first of all, they're viewed as a cost. Usually by the leadership of the farm trainings can be viewed as a necessary evil. You're taking people out of their busy production day with a classroom training that can be disruptive and can limit productivity. When you as the farm manager feel that way, that message often gets through to the employees as well. And they may view the training as, this is just something that we have to go through. The boss isn't really behind it. So why am I going to be behind it either? They're often viewed as an event. So an event being one and done, we'll train on this topic, we'll never revisit it again. And it often doesn't have a lot of retention or information retained by the employees themselves. They're often speaker dominated. So typically you bring your workers into a conference room, they're out in the cold, you bring them into a warm environment, talking head in the front of the room, they start to nod off, they start to fall asleep because they're not really actively engaged in the training at all. Lack of interest. Often our trainings, we don't spend the time to make the connection to the employee. Why are we training on this topic? Why is it important for you to learn this topic? How will this training topic benefit you? And then lastly, no follow-up. So we don't really refer back to the training, and it becomes, as we said earlier, an event with little follow-through. How much do we actually retain from a training? And it actually might be disappointing when you see how much is actually retained from most trainings. So the research shows that we retain approximately 10% of what we see, 30 to 40% of what we see and hear, and 90% of what we see, hear, and do. So the takeaway is where you can get employees involved, get them active, get them out of their chairs. That's when you see higher retention rates of the material you presented. Let's use an example of skid steer safety training. So you decide to offer training on skid steer safety at your farm, and your method is show them a video. Okay, so showing them a video is going to be in that see and hear component of about 30 to 40%. So upwards of 70% of the information presented to your team in that video, they walk away without even hearing or paying attention to. So something to keep in mind when you're developing employee development trainings. We've talked at the beginning of the program a little bit about upskilling, and upskilling is different than training. And it's something that I would really encourage you to consider as you're training your team, to think about modifying what you've maybe done historically with your team with a focus more on upskilling. So what's the difference? So the difference between training and upskilling is in training, employees build competency and knowledge per a job requirement. So earlier I gave the skid steer example. So you're training about skid steers, which is one component of employees' jobs. Upskilling, on the other hand, is an educational process concerned with the overall growth of the employee. So you can see that the impact with training is typically short term, sometimes shorter term than you even realize. Whereas upskilling is something that hopefully they're retaining, they're taking with them, they're thinking about how it has helped them with their own skills, and so it's longer term. The focus with training is short term versus a future focus with upskilling. Training is very job oriented, so very specific to the job at hand, versus upskilling, which is more career oriented. And then motivation. Who's motivated when you give a training? Actually, the trainer to get it done. So the motivation is on the trainer versus the employees themselves in actually gaining a skill, something that they can use for their own future. And then finally, the objective. So with training, it's to improve work performance. So it's very farm focused versus upskilling, which is preparing employees for the future. So it's more employee focused. So here's just a few tips to think about as you try to transition the training that you've historically provided to your employees to upskilling. First of all, make it relevant. Make sure that employees understand how this is benefiting them. What are they getting out of it versus what are you getting out of it, or what is the farm getting out of it? So make that connection so employees know how it's relevant. Encourage active participation. Make sure that they're up out of their chairs, that they have an opportunity to actually interact with you, to ask questions, to understand more about the training. Consider experience and background. We know that more and more employees are joining farms without any significant farm background. So it's important that you recognize the experience and background of your employees and make sure that they're understanding, that they're comprehending whatever it is you're upskilling on. So for example, in the photo, if we're talking about PTO safety, does your audience know what a PTO is? If they've never been around farm tractors, if they've never had an opportunity to work with farm equipment, PTO may be an acronym that they've never experienced or encountered before. So it's important to back up a step, talk about the power takeoff and what that can do for equipment and why it's a danger on our farms. And then lastly, practice makes perfect. So your first upskilling event may not be perfect. This is something that you can evolve towards and hopefully improve over time. But I would really encourage you to kind of think about the trainings that you're providing for your employees and make sure that the relevancy and the participation is there so the employees are actively engaged in the training. Ultimately, our goal with any kind of training, upskilling, career pathing, employee development that we're providing is to reduce turnover. That's ultimately the goal, is to control employee turnover. And turnover is costing you money. And these costs in turnover are often hidden costs. So they may not be something that you're totally aware of. But the costs of employee turnover are associated with losses in productivity. Every time you have a vacancy, you're losing productivity. You may be spending time yourself as a manager, filling in for the gaps that vacancies have created on your team, or you may be pulling other employees into that gap, which reduces their productivity and the job that they're supposed to be doing. Also, there's the hiring and recruiting costs. The costs of you spending time meeting with people, interviewing them, screening, background checks, all that takes time, which that time translates into a cost. And then there's the training costs. So again, we said that many employees are joining farms without a farm background. They require a lot of training, onboarding, to make sure that they have the skill sets that they need to be productive and stay safe on your farm. But that all takes time and that all costs money. And then we talked about the loss in productivity. The loss of productivity is not just the time that the position is vacant, but the fact that new hires do not, in most cases, perform at the same level as the person who left that job, because it takes time to learn. It takes time to ramp up those skills. It takes time to ask your questions and understand what you're doing. So even if the position is filled quickly, there's still a loss in productivity as people build the new skill set that they need. I'd encourage you as farm managers to focus on avoidable turnover as the metric that you're referring to. And what I mean by avoidable turnover, another way to think about it is regrettable turnover, is where you as the manager could have done something about the person's departure. In other words, you could have intervened in some way, whether it be through career opportunities for them, a sense of belonging, a sense of feeling. And I'll give a quick example. So you hire a college student for the summer who is going, who aspires to go ultimately to dental school. So clearly this employee is going to leave your farm because they want to be a dentist, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that particular individual's departure is not avoidable. It's inevitable, actually, that they're going to leave your farm. So don't count that departure against you. But what the avoidable turnover is where you have a key employee who's contributing significantly to your farm business, and they quit. They quit to go to another farm. They quit to reinvent themselves and go in a totally different career direction. And those are the ones that you need to be the most focused on as a business performance metric. I want to spend a little bit of time on, as we're talking about employee turnover, why do farm workers quit? And Cornell University did a study to determine just that. They did a lengthy survey process where they were able to capture information from farm workers who quit their job. And these are the reasons that these farm workers gave for leaving the farm that they were working on. The number one reason, unsafe working conditions. So this is something that unfortunately reflects badly on our industry. It's something that has plagued agriculture for many, many years. And I think all of us can say we've been to farms where it does make you wonder, you know, if safe practices are a priority on that farm. And I'm not saying every farm is like that. There's many farms that are very safety conscious and very focused on safety. But unfortunately, there are those farms who have not made safe working conditions a priority, and their workers are leaving because of it. The next most popular reason for quitting is perceptions of unfair treatment. Now, notice the word perceptions. Perceptions aren't always reality, but for the person that's quitting, they are the reality. And so it's important to stay connected with your team, to understand what's creating these perceptions that they may have, because it's a pretty high reason for people to leave. The next one is conflict, either conflict with coworkers or conflict with supervisors. And this is something that managers hate. I know, I get it. Managers hate conflict. It takes you out of your busy day. It takes you away from the things that you'd rather be focusing on. But when you ignore conflict, many employees won't address it themselves. They'll just leave. They'll just avoid the situation and they'll quit. The next one is confusing or vague instructions. Let's face it, farms are busy places, and often new hires are brought in without a clear understanding of what they're doing. All too often, farm managers hope that employees will just figure things out. And without clear instructions and training, they don't. And so confusing and vague instructions are a popular reason for quitting. The next one is poorly maintained or inadequate equipment. And this is another one that we've seen on various farms all across the state, where we make do with antiquated or broken, in some cases, equipment or tools that can really limit an employee's effectiveness. The next one is inadequate pay. And I think it's important to note that this was not number one. This was actually down the list of ways. Many farm managers think that when employees quit, it's because of money. And money is a factor, don't get me wrong, but it's often not as high as the farm manager might think it is. We'll continue the discussion with those reasons that were listed as moderate concern. Not feeling listened to. This is something where the employee is feeling that they don't matter. They're not valued. They're not feeling part of the team, and that no one respects their opinion or their ability to contribute to the farm. Lack of trust. This can be a lack of trust between the employee and the manager. It can be a lack of trust between teams, coworkers, but for whatever reason, and it probably relates back to the conflict reason on the first group that we looked at, but a lack of trust in the workforce. No feedback. Every employee wants to know how they're doing, regardless of their role, regardless of their position within the organization. They want to know how they're doing. Because this is an area that's rather informal on many farms, there's lots of farms that really don't have a formal performance review process. Feedback sometimes takes a back burner, and employees are not hearing what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, what they need to improve on. Boredom was another reason that farm workers listed, and that probably has to do with monotonous, repetitive work without an opportunity to advance into other things and other opportunities with the farm. And then the last one we'll talk about on this is unfair or inconsistent pay practices. Many farms don't have a formal compensation structure, if you will. Pay can be somewhat inconsistent. So I'll give a hypothetical example. You hire your wife's cousin to work on the farm. And because he's family, you pay him $2 an hour more than the other workers. Now, in a perfect world, nobody talks about how much they're making with coworkers, but we all know we don't live in a perfect world, and this information gets shared, which can be very disheartening and discouraging for those employees who are making $2 less, particularly when those employees are very likely the ones that are actually training your wife's cousin to do whatever job you've selected them for. So just some things to be thinking about. As people leave your farm, I would encourage you to do exit interviews. An exit interview is simply an opportunity to understand why the person is quitting. So the employee gives you notice, hopefully they're giving you notice. The employee gives you notice that they're leaving, and in that window of opportunity between the notice and their last day with you, you understand things about what could have been different to keep that employee. You can get valuable insights into manager issues. If you have a rogue supervisor on your team that's driving people away, you can sometimes get that information through the process of an exit interview. It can help you stay competitive with salary and benefits. So if the person is willing to share with you, yeah, I'm going down the road to so-and-so's farm for $1 more an hour, that's something that you can say, okay, there's a data point. So-and-so is paying $1 more than I am. And I'm not saying that you have to respond in like, but it's always good, and it's always good information to know what other employers in your area are offering. And then ultimately, this information that you're capturing through exit interviews can help strengthen your workplace culture. Things you can learn to make the experience better for the employees that are still with you and the employees that want to stay long term. I would encourage you to also do exit interviews with your seasonal employees. Even though the hope is that the seasonal employee will come back next year, it's a good idea to touch base with them at the end of the season and just ask these questions about what do they like about the job? What didn't they like about the job? What would it take to get them to come back and work for you again in the next season? And then if there's any barriers or obstacles that are preventing them from doing that. So even though seasonal workers may be kind of a subcategory on your farm that you view differently, I think the value of talking with them when they leave at the end of the season can be a valuable thing. And speaking of seasonal employees, there are some techniques and tips to make them feel part of things. Seasonal employees, like every other employee, want a sense of belonging. So if you can share goals with them, share your farm strategy, make sure they understand what your farm is about, your mission and your vision, make them feel connected, like they matter, more than just temporary workers that will be gone in a few weeks. So spend the time with your seasonal employees to make sure that they're engaged and feeling part of things. Reward them for great work. There's a variety of ways you can do that. Seasonal employees are typically not benefit eligible, but there's perks that you can provide them that make them want to come back. And they could be, quality incentives around the work that they do, could be an end of season bonus of some type, or even just a free lunch every now and then, or perhaps, depending on the nature of your business, an employee discount for produce or something like that. So things to think about and make them feel connected. And then make sure you keep in touch with your seasonal employees. And little things mean a lot. You could send them a card or a text on their birthday. Invite them to a holiday party that you're having for your employee. Make sure that you're staying connected with them. If you do an employee newsletter on your farm, make sure the seasonal employees are getting copies of that newsletter and feeling connected and involved. So these things may seem small and insignificant, but to the worker themselves, they can really provide a great opportunity to stay in touch. So in closing, I just want you to hopefully take away from this session a couple questions to think about. And those questions are, what makes your farm a special place to work? What is it about your farm that would make employees want to stay or make seasonal employees want to come back? What is your strength as an employer? What are you bringing to the table that would make employees want to stick around and work for you and support the vision and mission long-term of your farm? If you'd like to learn more about how to do that, I'd encourage you to sign up for a class on becoming an employer of choice. Becoming an employer of choice is a 4-week self-paced course with weekly discussion groups. The lessons include the keys to employee engagement, improving your workplace culture, understanding your leadership style and how to adapt that style in various situations, developing a values, vision, mission for your farm, finding the right people and keeping the right people. And if you're interested in how to sign up for a class like that, or you'd like more information on any of the articles or fact sheets that I mentioned during this program, I hope you'll visit our Farm Management Topic Hub. You can reach our Farm Management Topic Hub at farms.extension.wisc.edu. And again, there's a wealth of information there, not just on HR and safety related topics, but all the other topics that my colleagues in farm management contribute as well. So that's my presentation for today. My contact information is on the screen. Again, my name is Jim Versweyveld. My email address is there and my phone number. I'm happy to help you with HR questions that you may have on your farm or ways to build programs around keeping the right people. So thank you. And I'll turn things over to Allison.
Awesome. And I will, haven't seen any questions come in yet via the chat, but want to give people another minute to ask questions that they might have. I will share my screen here, and while questions might be coming in, that's the one I want. Perfect. While questions might be coming in, I will give another quick the final in Cranberry country pesticide applicator training and test, like a big in-person session that Glenn Nice is going to teach, is going to be March 30th at the Best Western in Toma. If you need to sign up for that, I will plop a link in the chat here for those who needed that this year. I hope that someone will ask a question, but if no one else does, Jim, have you seen, I guess I'll ask this way. Do you talk more directly, frequently with, farm owners and operations managers, or with individual, employees who are looking for work? And kind of like, what are the best ways, in your opinion, to get a sense of, the lay of the land and what local employees or potential employees might want to hear from us as potential employers?
Sure. So yeah, that's a great question, Allison. And my focus is primarily on working with farm managers. So my audience, when I present or write a paper, is farm managers, and the people most likely to give me a call or email me are managers trying to address a specific issue, whether it be employee performance issue, compensation questions, employee development questions, termination questions, unfortunately, are fairly common. But those are the types of questions that I field, and they're primarily from managers of farms of every aspect of our industry that are contacting me with their questions. So I'm happy to help with those. They can be complicated questions, and sometimes there's not always a clear-cut answer, but I'm always happy to talk through situations with farm managers and try to help them to, resolve whatever employee issue it is. I believe that in making better managers, when managers improve their leadership skills, all the employees benefit from that. So I feel like I'm indirectly helping farm workers through building better managers.
Absolutely. I'll see if we've got anything else, but if we haven't got more questions, I guess we'll still give it 1 or 2 more minutes to give people an opportunity. And I know sometimes these questions people prefer to ask anonymously, so feel free to use that drop down and say to Allison, and I'll ask your question on your behalf. Other than that, I want to thank all of the farm management team who were able to join us today. So Tricia and Steph, as well as Jim and Joy, and then Katie as well, that wasn't there today, and then of course also Tom and Alex at the Growers Association. Thank all of you guys for being here today. I know presumably the weather is good for sanding for some people, so I know we'll be sending this out to a couple people, and a couple people are on the road too. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll let us all head into our Friday afternoons. Awesome. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Allison.
Thanks.